Hello. Today General Hospital will reveal after the passing of Monica Quartermaine, the family and those closest to her were thrust into a sea of grief, each struggling to cope with the loss of a matriarch who had long been the cornerstone of their lives. For Scout Quartermaine, the news of Monica's death was not just a devastating blow, it was the beginning of an overwhelming emotional journey that left her reeling. Though Scout was still a young child, her bond with Monica was irreplaceable. Monica had been more than just a grandmother figure, she had been a guiding presence in Scout's life, a person who had nurtured her and showered her with love. The loss of someone who had filled that vital role was a wound that would be difficult for Scout to heal. What made the situation even more complicated for Scout was the strict control her father, Drew Kane, had imposed on her life. Drew's protective instincts, though born from love and concern, had resulted in a set of harsh restrictions that kept Scout isolated from the people she longed to be close to, her family. Drew had put in place strict measures, banning Scout from interacting with key members of the Quartermaine family, including Danny, Alexis, Molly, and Christina. While Drew's intentions were undoubtedly rooted in a desire to shield Scout from potential harm, his actions were making her feel more and more alienated. He feared that the complex and strained relationships within the Quartermaine family would only lead to further heartache for Scout, especially when the wounds of past conflicts had not yet fully healed. However, in the wake of Monica's death, Drew's restrictions only seemed to deepen Scout's sense of loneliness. Scout, already devastated by the loss of Monica, found herself further distanced from those she loved and needed the most. The grief she felt over Monica's death was compounded by the isolation she experienced at the hands of her father's protective instincts. She was unable to turn to her extended family for comfort, leaving her to navigate the depths of her sorrow in solitude. As the news of Monica's passing settled in, it became clear to Scout just how much she had lost, not just a beloved figure in her life, but also the connection to a family that had once been a source of stability and love. Drew's insistence on keeping her apart from her family was, in some ways, making her grief even harder to bear. She missed the warmth and comfort that her family had always provided, especially at a time when she needed them the most. The isolation she felt was suffocating, and her sense of abandonment grew with each passing day. Monica had always been a pillar of strength for Scout, offering her the kind of nurturing that only a grandmother could. Scout had confided in her, laughed with her, and sought solace in her presence during difficult times. The thought of never seeing her again, never receiving another reassuring hug or piece of advice from Monica, was an unbearable reality for Scout to face. She could not imagine a world without the woman who had been so integral to her sense of self. The loss of Monica also signified the loss of an anchor in Scout's life, leaving her to float aimlessly in a sea of confusion and sadness. The absence of her grandmother created a void that Scout felt with every fiber of her being. As the grief from Monica's death began to settle in, Scout was left to wonder how she would ever move forward without the person who had always been there for her. In this turbulent emotional state, Scout found herself questioning her father's actions. While she understood that Drew was trying to protect her, she could not help but feel betrayed by his refusal to allow her to grieve alongside the rest of the Quartermaine family. She longed to be with those who could understand her pain, to feel the presence of family who could help her navigate this devastating loss. But instead, she was trapped in a cycle of isolation, with no one to turn to but her father, whose overbearing protection made her feel more like a prisoner than a daughter in mourning. As the days went on, Scout's sense of isolation only deepened. She could not reconcile her need for familial support with the restrictions placed upon her by Drew. Despite her father's love and concern, Scout could not help but feel like she was being punished for wanting to mourn in her own way, surrounded by the family that had always been there for her. The tight grip Drew had on her life made it nearly impossible for Scout to find any comfort in the chaos of her emotions. The pain of losing Monica was not just an emotional wound, it was a wound that cut deep into the fabric of Scout's identity. Monica had been more than a grandmother to her, she had been a mentor, a source of wisdom, and a person who had made Scout feel loved and cherished. Now, with Monica's death, Scout was left to grapple with the harsh reality that life would never be the same again. Her father's overprotective nature, while well-intentioned, only served to amplify her feelings of loss and confusion. The mourning process for Scout was not just about grieving the loss of Monica, it was also about mourning the loss of the connection she had once had with her family. In the days following Monica's death, Scout's emotional turmoil reached its peak. The weight of her grief, compounded by the isolation imposed by Drew, became almost too much for her to bear. She longed for a sense of normalcy, a sense of belonging within her family, but it seemed that every time she reached out for comfort, she was met with resistance. The emotional barriers Drew had placed between Scout and the rest of the Quartermaine family were beginning to feel insurmountable, and Scout found herself caught in a struggle between her need for connection and her father's desire to keep her safe. As the emotional storm raged inside Scout, the weight of Monica's death became all the more unbearable. The sense of loss was overwhelming, and Scout could not help but feel that she was facing it alone. While Drew's protection may have been motivated by love, it only served to intensify the isolation and pain Scout was feeling. It was a painful reality that Scout could not escape, no matter how hard she tried to push past it. Her world had shifted, and nothing would ever be the same again. Scout's relationship with Monica Quartermaine transcended the typical familial bond. It wasn't just the warmth of a grandmother's love or the shared blood that connected them, it was Monica's unwavering presence in Scout's life that had made her more than just a relative. Monica had been a constant source of stability and compassion, offering Scout not just love but a sense of security in an often chaotic and unpredictable world. She was the one who had taken the time to teach Scout life's lessons, to show her how to navigate the storms of her family's complexities. Whenever things seemed uncertain or when Scout felt overwhelmed, Monica was the one to calm the turbulence, providing a safe haven where Scout could find peace. With Monica's passing, Scout was left with an aching void that no one could fill. The pain of losing such a guiding figure was unbearable, and Scout knew she had to mourn the loss, but she found herself in an impossible situation. She longed to attend the funeral, to say her final goodbyes to the woman who had been there for her through it all. Yet, despite her deep yearning to be present for the ceremony, there was the looming, harsh reality that Drew, her father, would never allow it. Drew had already set the boundaries for Scout's contact with the Quartermaine family, fearing the deep-rooted dysfunction and emotional scars that still lingered among its members. He believed that keeping Scout away from the family would protect her from further pain, but in doing so, he had inadvertently isolated her from the very people she needed most. For Scout, this situation wasn't just about attending a funeral, it was about saying a proper goodbye to someone who had shaped her childhood, someone whose influence was woven into the very fabric of her being. The choice she faced was agonizing, her devotion to Monica was clear, but it was equally clear that Drew's desire to shield her from family conflict and emotional harm wasn't going to allow her to grieve in the way she needed. This conflict left Scout torn between her longing for closure and the protective, but overbearing, rules Drew had imposed. As the days passed, Danny Morgan, Monica's son and a man who understood grief all too well, became acutely aware of the emotional toll Monica's death was taking on Scout. He could see that the young girl was struggling with the weight of her sorrow, and he knew, deep down, that no one should face the death of a loved one alone. He understood the love that Scout had for Monica, the way she looked up to her and cherished their time together. Monica had been an anchor in Scout's life, and now, without her, Scout was drifting in a sea of grief. Danny felt it was his responsibility, as Monica's son and Scout's family, to ensure that the young girl wouldn't have to endure the loss by herself. Recognizing the importance of this moment, Danny decided to take matters into his own hands. He sought out Drew, fully aware of the tension between them and the challenges of their relationship, yet hoping to appeal to Drew's sense of understanding and compassion. He approached Drew with a request that was both heartfelt and urgent. He asked Drew to lift, even if temporarily, some of the restrictions that had been placed on Scout, allowing her to attend Monica's funeral. Danny knew this wasn't just about a ritual, it was about giving Scout the opportunity to say goodbye properly, to honor the woman who had been a mother figure to her. It was a critical moment for Scout's emotional healing, and Danny felt that it was a chance she deserved, given everything Monica had done for her. But Drew was not easily swayed. While he understood that Scout needed to face the grief of losing Monica, his protective instincts, sharpened by his own past and his desire to shield Scout from the emotional turmoil that seemed inevitable in the Quartermaine family, made him hesitant. Drew still viewed the Quartermaine family as a source of emotional upheaval, too many unresolved issues, too many complications that could leave Scout vulnerable. His decision to keep Scout away from the family, especially during such a volatile time, was driven by a deep belief that it was for her own good. He didn't want her to be caught in the crossfire of family drama, which could only make her grief even harder to bear. Drew's solution, or what he believed was the best course of action, was to rely on Willow Tate. Drew trusted Willow. He saw her as a grounding influence in Scout's life, someone who could help her navigate her emotions without the added complications of the Quartermaine family's baggage. He genuinely believed that Scout could find comfort and solace in Willow's presence, away from the turmoil of the funeral and the unresolved tensions within the family. Yet Danny's plea resonated with Drew on a deeper level. He couldn't deny that Scout's emotional well-being was at stake, and he knew that the loss of Monica was something Scout couldn't face alone. Danny's request, though difficult for Drew to accept, stirred a part of him that questioned his rigid stance. He knew that Scout needed to grieve in her own way, with the people who mattered most to her. The emotional strain she was under was not something to be ignored, it was a part of her healing process. As Drew wrestled with his decision, he understood that there was no easy answer. The battle within him was a war between his protective instincts and the reality that, sometimes, protection meant allowing someone to face their pain, even when it hurt. Drew could see that this moment was important not just for Scout, but for him as well. He had to decide whether to cling to his overprotective instincts or to let Scout experience the healing power of family, even if it meant exposing her to the emotional risks he had tried so hard to shield her from. Ultimately, Drew's choice would be a defining moment in their relationship, one that tested his ability to balance protection with freedom, control with trust. It was a moment where Drew would have to let go, if only a little, and trust that Scout's emotional resilience would allow her to heal in her own way. Whether or not he would be able to make that leap, and whether he would allow Scout to mourn Monica in a way that felt right for her, remained uncertain. This was not just about one decision or one funeral, it was about Drew's journey as a father and Scout's journey as a young girl navigating the complex landscape of grief, family, and love. It was a difficult path, but it was one that would ultimately shape their future and the way they would face the challenges that lay ahead. The heart-wrenching reality of Monica Quartermaine's passing had cast a long shadow over the entire Quartermaine family, but for Scout Quartermaine, the pain was particularly raw. Monica had been more than just a grandmother to her, she was a guiding light, a source of love and stability that Scout had always relied on. As a young girl, Scout had looked up to Monica not only for the wisdom she imparted but also for the deep emotional connection they shared. Monica was the person who had been there during Scout's most challenging moments, offering comfort, encouragement, and a sense of belonging. The loss of Monica was a devastating blow that left Scout feeling both physically and emotionally unmoored. What made this situation even more complicated for Scout was the overbearing protection her father, Drew Kane, had imposed upon her. Drew, in his attempts to shelter Scout from the many complexities of their family dynamics, had drawn a thick line between Scout and the other members of the Quartermaine family. He believed that distancing her from the dysfunction within the Quartermaine clan would protect her from unnecessary emotional turmoil, but in doing so, he inadvertently created a barrier between Scout and those she loved most. Drew's fears were deeply rooted in the unresolved conflicts and fraught relationships within the family, and while his intentions were pure, they left Scout isolated in her grief. Drew's restrictions were clear and firm. Scout was forbidden from seeing Danny, Alexis, Molly, Christina, or any other members of the Quartermaine family. These were people who had been part of Scout's life, people who loved her and who she needed now more than ever. Yet, Drew believed that the best way to protect Scout from pain was to keep her away from the very family that could help her heal. The relationship between Scout and Drew had always been one of deep love, but in this moment, it was becoming increasingly strained. Scout was suffocating under the weight of her father's love that, while well-meaning, was stifling her ability to properly grieve. The emotional toll of Monica's death was profound, and Scout found herself in a battle between her own heartache and her father's protective grip. She longed to be with her family, to grieve alongside them, to share in the memories of the woman who had meant so much to all of them. But instead, she was isolated, unable to find solace in the faces of those who could truly understand her pain. Drew's insistence on shielding her from the Quartermain family only intensified her loneliness, making her feel as though her grief was something she had to bear in solitude. This was not just a loss of a loved one, it was the loss of a connection that had been a cornerstone of Scout's life, and now, she had no way to process it fully. As the days passed and the reality of Monica's death settled in, it became more and more clear to Scout that she needed closure, something that could only come from saying goodbye to the woman who had helped raise her. However, she knew that in order to do this, she would have to confront the restrictions Drew had placed on her. She couldn't fathom a world in which she couldn't say her final goodbyes to Monica, but the rules her father had set were non-negotiable in his mind. Drew's fears about exposing Scout to the family drama and turmoil were powerful, but they were also pushing Scout further away from the very thing she needed most in this moment, family. Meanwhile, Danny Morgan, Monica's son and someone who had witnessed his own fair share of grief, could see the toll Monica's death was taking on Scout. He understood better than anyone the kind of bond Monica had shared with her granddaughter. Monica had been both a mother figure and a stabilizing force in Scout's life, and now, Scout was left to navigate this unimaginable loss on her own. Danny knew that no child should be asked to bear the burden of mourning without the support of family, and he recognized that this was a pivotal moment for Scout. She needed her family, not just for emotional support, but also for the opportunity to say goodbye in a way that would allow her to heal. Danny's request to Drew was born out of compassion and understanding. He wasn't simply asking for a favor, he was pleading for Drew to see the larger picture. Danny knew that, at this moment, Scout's grief was not something that could be faced in isolation. It wasn't just about the funeral, it was about giving Scout a chance to connect with the family that had also been shaped by Monica's love and presence. It was about allowing Scout the opportunity to grieve alongside the people who understood the depth of her loss, who could offer her the comfort and support she desperately needed. Danny made it clear that this was not a matter of family drama or unresolved tensions, it was about Scout's well-being and her ability to find peace after such a profound loss. But Drew, despite understanding the logic behind Danny's plea, was not easily swayed. His fears, though founded on a genuine desire to protect Scout, were a heavy burden on his shoulders. Drew saw the potential for harm in allowing Scout to interact with the Quartermain family, especially in the emotional state they were all in. He worried that exposing Scout to the unresolved conflicts within the family could create more pain for her. Drew felt that he could protect Scout from that pain, that he could shield her from the emotional fallout that would inevitably come from attending Monica's funeral and facing the complex web of family relationships. As Drew struggled with Danny's request, he was also forced to confront his own beliefs about protection and love. He knew that his daughter was suffering, and deep down, he understood that his decision was about more than just keeping her away from family drama, it was about him grappling with his own inability to shield her from the harsh realities of life. Drew had always been a father who believed in protecting his daughter at all costs, but now, he faced a moment where that protection might actually hinder her emotional growth. Could he really shield her from grief? Could he protect her from the realities of loss? The more Drew thought about it, the more he realized that perhaps the most loving thing he could do was to let Scout experience her grief, even if it meant exposing her to the difficult truths of family life. Scout's tears, her cries for the chance to say goodbye to Monica, echoed in Drew's mind, and he couldn't help but wonder if he was doing the right thing. His instincts told him to keep her safe, but his heart told him that Scout needed more than safety, she needed closure, connection, and the ability to say goodbye in her own way. It was a decision that would forever change the course of their relationship, one that would shape how Drew saw his role as a father and how Scout learned to navigate the complexities.